Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 138 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to continue on our Fundamentals of Marksmanship series, and this one's titled, Seeing is Not Believing. This is a big one. It's important. I've been spending a lot of time talking and thinking about all the years of teaching and instructing and how people see things differently and see things wrongly as well, and how they prioritize what they're doing, and sometimes just by sight. So your eyes can deceive you, and in shooting, your vision, a lot of people depend on what's in front of their face as far as shooting goes. This is a big error a lot of shooters make. So really trying to share with you a lot of insight on what we do and the concepts and the thought process when it gets to making these shots and making them count. So this is a big one. Hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, here we go. So before we get started, I would like to say a quick thanks to MDT. MDT is a proud sponsor of the show and maker of fine rifle chassis. You can stop over to mdttac.com and see all of the fine selections they have today. We built a lot of the new hunting rifles on the HNT 26. Of course, the new MDT ACC Elite is out, and if you listen to previous podcasts, they've got a lot of new stuff coming out. We're excited to get them here and get them in our hands and get them on the firing line. So we'll be doing some video reviews on our YouTube channel on them when they get here. But if you want to upgrade your rifle, factory or custom, a great way to do it is with a new chassis. So you can stop over to mdttac.com and check out their selection today. We'd also like to thank Krieger Barrel, maker of fine cut rifle barrels. We use them here on all of our custom long-range rifles. They are made in the great state of Wisconsin. They have a new program called KriegerDirect.com where you can log on and get your barrel in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So if you need the best and you want it now, stop over to KriegerDirect.com. That's KriegerDirect.com. Well, good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Jamie. How are you today?
Good. It's a life of problem solving, right?
Oh, we have our challenges in front of us, I think.
Oh, sure. So we're getting ready to move the facility. We're getting ready to buy machines.
Oh.
It has been awesome, but man alive, a lot to take on. I asked you to join us on the podcast. I didn't tell him much what we were talking about.
Yeah, dropping me in it yet again. What am I going to say?
Yeah, so he's sort of being thrown under the bus, but it's good, though, because I don't want to give him a lot of time to think about this and how he's going to talk about it and really take his unbiased opinions, because spending time with shooters when it comes to training is a lot different than becoming a great marksman. I often find that if you want to really become awesome at shooting, start spending a lot of time around people, start teaching the subject, be around it 24/7, and you really get to see all the ways people have a tendency to mess things up.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? We sometimes take things for granted. We have learned along the way, and we're like, well, why would you do that? Kind of a thing. When we're observing other people shooting, we're looking at it. I remember a particular incident last year when there was a father-son team at the shooting school, and the young lad there was shooting right-handed, and about an hour and a half into the school, he started shooting left-handed. And Jamie walked up behind him, and the look on his face was one of just complete confusion, like, wait there, we didn't have any left-handed shooters on the line when we started the day. What happened?
So there's a lot that goes on, and I think, no fault to the shooter. So I always say in the class that we tend to focus on the things that are in front of our eyes, and unfortunately, we go brain dead from the neck down when it comes to fundamentals because we can't watch ourselves shoot. So even though we have fun with it in the class and we talk, and we actually show students sometimes when we see this stuff, somebody not shooting correctly, like you get to see the cause and effect, and you get to see it from a perspective that you can't see it as a shooter. So you do these things wrong, but unfortunately, you can't see it.
Yeah, my opinion would be that maybe it's not correctly. Right, it's a consistency thing. It's I know Jamie's view is correctly right because we're trying to teach a method, teach a process, if you like. I think everybody settles down into their own process that they find to be successful and repeatable, and that's obviously the ultimate right? So we're obviously trying to lead people down a pathway that we found gives ultimately a successful, repeatable process. But it doesn't mean that our way's the only way. I don't think you meant that.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Right? You didn't mean that. So I think it's just that we're trying to provide people a framework to start to learn on, and you can always go back to those fundamentals if you start struggling at any particular time in the future. That's the key.
Yeah, and Richard hit it right. And we actually say that in the class, is that everybody sort of gets on a kick, especially sometimes instructors, that there's one way, the only way, my way, and it's the right way. And I always say it in the class that we always try to give people suggestions as we're watching them shoot as to, how they're fitting the rifle, get the rifle fit properly. Maybe we'll have them move over here a little bit, move over there, move their hand. And what we're trying to do is give them the freedom to move around to find the way that they shoot a rifle and that they're comfortable and that they're repeatable. Because truthfully, it isn't one size fits all. People's body shapes, sizes, how their face contacts the gun, how round their face is, how thin their face. There's a million things that get involved to getting a shooter comfortable on a rifle and finding a way that their interface with the rifle is consistent and repeatable.
Yeah, and we found along the way that we're fortunate on the line when people rent a rifle from us that, they jump onto the rifle, we set them up as best we can. Hey, is that comfortable? Yeah, that feels, oh no, this is a bit long, it reaches, whatever. We set it up. But normally an hour or so later, you can see people are like, they're not really that comfortable. Mm-hmm. And then we make a few more tweaks and they're like, oh, okay, now this feels comfortable. And I've found myself is that process would actually continue. So you get those refinements that carry on over the years. And now here's Richard, the old guy, shooting an AICS stock, and it's still the most comfortable stock I've ever used. But still, if I jump onto another stock, I kind of know the feeling that I'm looking for now. And then I try and make that stock feel like my AICS stock. Mm-hmm. Right? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. It does. And the other thing is we're looking for results. So when we're moving shooters around or we're adjusting them or we're trying to get them and a rifle to work well together as a team, in the end, the targets are, you'll see that all of a sudden their shooting completely changes, their consistency changes, and usually their comfort. They'll be like, wow, I'm a lot more comfortable. And all of a sudden I watch the results on the target as we're moving shooters around to see, what results are getting. And I encourage them to do the same. Like as they're moving and getting things set up, watch how you're shooting. If all of a sudden your groups are really coming together, you're starting to get close to
right.
You.
And there's a simile here that I've experienced, right? I used to be a huge golfer, right? I got down to a legitimate 4 handicap. And when I was playing my best golf, I'd never had to think about my swing. All I had to think about was, okay, am I pointing in the right direction? Do I have the right club in my hand? Okay, this ball is going, that's where it's going. And I didn't have to think about my swing anymore. And it's the same when you get comfortable with the fundamentals. You kind of just get into the gun and you start focusing on the target. Yeah, you have to do some process work, natural point of aim and so on and so forth. But as soon as that's done, you can kind of clear your mind of that and start focusing on the work that you're actually planning to do. And of course, that can be a long time if you're taking a hunting shot, or that could be a very, very short amount of time available if you're in a competitive situation.
And I've said this before in the podcast too, that some of my best matches I've ever shot, I felt like I was putting no effort in at all. It was like everything was just naturally coming together. I wasn't struggling. I wasn't fighting. And actually, I felt like I could whistle to the rifle and it would go do the shooting for me and come back.
The training was done. Now it's time to act.
Yeah. It was fun. And I don't name drop, and I'm not trying to say anything outside of, we're blessed that we get people from all different, jobs and careers. But just a case in point, we had an active duty Navy SEAL sniper here this year working with us. He had built a rifle with us, and he had been struggling with a particular situation and the way that he was shooting. And a lot of people, and this is going to lead us into this podcast, but just small changes, like we were talking about watching the results of the targets. He was struggling with a particular area. He just wanted to get a little sharper, right? And just moving around a little bit. And then all of a sudden, one small change of a suggestion, just watching him shoot, standing behind him, watching him shoot, right? And then it was just like, bang, the lights came on. His groups just actually even as a world-class shooter as he was, just started hammering them in there. And he was like, that's the most comfortable I've ever been on a rifle. And it's a little bit different than maybe what is taught in some of the schools. And so, but it had to do with his fit, his body, and how he was sort of working with the rifle. And the results speak for themselves, you know?
Well, this is all a very mechanical thing. So, I mean, just the basics of the reach from like the web of your thumb to where your finger, you know, the pad of your finger is onto the trigger. If you can adjust that, it can make a huge difference in your consistency and trigger pull. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you've got someone who can observe what you're doing, or we've talked about this before, just some simple video, which is all available to us now pretty easily, right? Mm-hmm. Just have someone take a video. I mean, a lot of, for instance, a very simple thing that we find at the shooting school all the time is the old explosive trigger finger, right? People crack the shot off and the trigger finger just flies off that trigger, and then they just tend to shake the rifle or they do all kinds of stuff. And we're just like, no, just pull straight through and clean pull straight to your shoulder. You'll be better off. And they start doing that, and yep, that takes a little wiggle out of the rifle, and guess what? They start shooting better.
And it's a habit, good and bad, pro and con, but they don't know
you're doing it.
Yeah,
right.
So this brings me up to this podcast, and I think I've been thinking about this a lot for the last week, and one of the things I think shooters fall victim and prey to is they think it has to do with their sight, their vision, and that the fundamentals of marksmanship and accurate shooting is just to stare at the target better, put the crosshairs on the target and shoot, and that it's a visual thing, that marksmanship is you lining up the crosshairs on the target and pulling the trigger. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret, and this is my personal opinion here. Our eyes control probably 90% of the input that gets into our body, but when it comes to shooting, our only job is basically to line up the two. It is not fundamentals, it is not marksmanship, it is not shooting. And I want to bring up a really good case in point here. We've had a couple customers over the years that have spent time talking with us, and some of them are blind, and they're hunters. And to me, at first when I heard that, I was like, what? I never knew. And so the one gentleman I got a chance to spend some time with talking, and he had said, well, what had happened is with their setup now that they can see whoever's with them hunting. They have a camera set up through the optics that they can see where he's aiming, and they tell him little more left, little more left, little more left. They walk him in, mm-hmm. and then they say, there's your spot. And he shoots and kills the animal. And the case in point is that if we remove that part, I always say shooters go brain dead from the neck down. Like they always focus on what's in front of their eyes, and that is probably 10% of the totality of things that you have to do right to become a great marksmanship. Yeah, you got to line the target up, but fundamentals is all from the neck down. And case in point is you take someone who's removed 90% of his input from the environments, which is your eyes, and now just think about all the senses that come alive. Think of all the things he's going to be focusing on. Think about his handhold, his trigger finger, how much he's going to be focusing on letting that rifle settle exactly where it's supposed to be and not moving it left and right while he's pulling the trigger. How he's focused in on breaking the trigger. It's funny how people that lose a sense of some kind, whether it's their hearing, their eyes, all of the other senses seem to pick up and really compensate for all the loss of the one sense that they have. And so I want to caution shooters out there, and we're going to dive into the fundamentals of marksmanship on the little things, because there's 1,000 little things, 1% gains, 2% gains in all these little areas that take a marksman from good to great. But just because you're staring harder and concentrating harder on lining that crosshairs up, although it's part of the process, it's actually, in my mind, the least of the fundamentals.
Do you think it's a function of some kind of target panic? Right? Because someone with a challenged sight that's using somebody else for the aiming portion of the job doesn't necessarily have to worry about target panic, right? Because they're not focused on the target per se, so they're able to just relax a little bit more and then pull the trigger.
There's probably some truth to that. I think that's a great point. Like, think about how people shoot in their 5-shot group. The fifth round, it's gone. How much people
Didn't I do that myself the other week when we were out shooting? I was like, grumble.
Yeah, you're staring at it. You're focusing harder. You're going to will that to go there. and it's the 5th round. Part of it was, so our long range shooting school, online. This isn't a plug for the online long range shooting school, but there's lots of targets that we put up. We had somebody email us and say, hey, because we put up our big dot drill, we call it. And he thought it was a typo when I said to put these big 4-inch dots at 100 yards. And he said, did you really mean to put this at 100 yards? And I was like, yeah. He goes, I don't get it. I was like, you will.
You will, yeah.
And same thing with that panic shot. Like, there's parts that we're going to get into that have some particular targets in training that after you shoot it, we'll get you some aha stuff. But I thought about this, like, because I want to make this next couple of series about fundamentals and trying to share with everybody as much as I can about what you should be thinking about if you really do love the art of marksmanship and you really want to shoot really well and you want to grow as a shooter. I think that's where most people is they hit a wall and they get frustrated, they get tired, they don't have fun, and as soon as you don't have fun, you're out. You just mentally check out and you find something else to do. But that part of it, I think, if I can emphasize anything in this particular podcast, is there's probably 90% more than what you're seeing, and most of it you can't see with your own eyes. Now, I'm not recommending to anybody out there to go out and practice shooting with your eyes closed, but when we focus on the fundamentals of marksmanship, and we're starting to say, okay, we're lined up on a target, ready to shoot, when we're trying to go over these things that you should be paying attention to, I guess maybe the best way I could describe it is do it as if you're blind. Try to feel the trigger. I mean, we talk about in the classroom, feel the trigger, where it's out on your finger, the placement, the curve, your hypersenses. Same thing with your cheek weld and cheek pressure, exactly where it's supposed to be, how it feels. There's all of that. It's really important. And if you focus on those things as while you're holding the alignment to the target, 90% of the time you're going to have more success in the field.
You just made me think of the modern Jedi.
Yeah. The modern Jedi, there we go.
The modern Jedi, right? Because you're trying to, what was it? There's Luke Skywalker with his lightsaber in the Millennium Falcon.
Oh, there we go.
Reach out with your thoughts, Luke.
Oh, that is so good.
And it's kind of like that in a way, right? We're trying to relax enough and just apply the training and the muscle memory that we've picked up. I mean, I'm kind of going out on a limb here a little bit. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are Star Wars fans. But I mean, I think it's the same kind of thing, right? We're trying to train into people a theory of how to get into the perfect mechanical position. And then also the process to go through to get into a consistent preparation for the shot. And then also then the mechanics of actually just, getting on target and pulling the trigger. So in some ways, young Jedi, we're trying to get that same kind of feeling. It's the same with everything, right? Every hand-eye coordinated sport, you're trying to get the mechanics down and then get it so it's not second nature but first nature, if you like, that's always what you do. That's a way of thinking about it, maybe.
And as teachers here or instructors, one of the things that we get to do that you, the shooter, never get to do is we are watching you shoot, and we're watching all of these little things, and we're looking and we're making adjustments. So we have the upper hand as far as like trying to find these things to improve you, for sure. But when you're shooting, you have to remove the thought process of the only way you can focus on the rest of the fundamentals of marksmanship, unfortunately, is with all of your other senses coming alive, feeling, touch, pressure, all of these things that you're going to put together. And you have to approach it as if you have to see it, but you can't see it with your eyes. And I think that's probably like the biggest takeaway, that when people really get hooked on into focusing on targets, especially at distances, they're trying to will the bull. They just think that if they stare at the crosshairs on that target, that bullet's going to get there. And they lose focus on all of these hundreds of things behind their eyes, their neck down, that they forget about. And then the problems just come out. It just doesn't work.
And I like that if people can get in a situation where they're super, super physically comfortable when they get into the gun. And then I think that starts the process off well, right? If you I'll go back to golf again. If you don't address the ball in a comfortable manner, you've kind of got to break that off, walk back, pick your sight line, pick your target, get back onto the ball, set yourself up, make sure you're nice and square, figure out what you do, figure out where you're going to hit the ball to, and then just go do it. And it's the same with shooting. I think if you get into a bad position, and when you're training, you can afford the time to pick yourself up and get back into the gun again. Once you get into the gun, if you're not feeling that same comfort, then you should just get off the gun and get back into it. Mm-hmm. And then, once you're on the gun, then start thinking about, cheek weld, cheek pressure, and start thinking about preparation for the shot, right? That's what you always term it, preparation for the shot.
Yeah.
Right?
And same thing at the school here. Like when we talk in the classroom, and I think it's amazing, like we have had a lot of alumni come through the shooting school, 2, 3, 4, 5, and some customers and friends have come every year since the first year we've held it.
Well, it is always a good time.
It's awesome, but I'm shocked sometimes. Like at first I was a little worried that they're coming through the school twice. Will they get anything else out of the school? And after even the second and third time, they're like, oh my God, I learned more than the first time. And I'm beginning to think that it's sinking in, it's making sense, and they're connecting all of the dots, hearing it 2 and 3 times. But I guess the big thing is in the classroom here, one of the other things we talk about is you should be able to get in position with the rifle with your eyes closed, build your position from scratch. And when you open your eyes, be looking straight through your optics. And I think people miss the point of that. Like they don't understand that you're not just jumping on the rifle and pulling the rifle up to your face and looking through your optics. You're setting everything up, your rear bag, your hand hold, your grip, cheek weld, cheek pressure, where you're touching your trigger, how much, all of these things. And then when you're opening your eyes, there it is. And so when you're practicing shooting, my suggestion here is, and maybe we'll dive more into this in future podcasts, we're going to talk about the little things that you'll be focusing on that you can't see, right? But I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea if you're dry firing in your basement as you're getting ready to shoot. Now, I'm not saying with live ammunition, please, not with live ammunition, but just try something fun. Turn the lights out or close your eyes and go through your entire mental process and start feeling everything, your trigger finger, your cheek weld, cheek pressure, get really familiar with it, and then snap that trigger. And then work, now keep in mind safety, no live rounds in the guns, no live rounds anywhere, right? If you're dry firing at the range or if you're dry firing in your basement, safety, 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 safety. But think about how that gentleman that has no eyes can shoot. To me, I sat back in total fascination and I thought, he's probably a better marksmanship than most right out of the gate because he's lost what most people think is the biggest advantage that they have.
Yes, I want to carry on that first thought. I think that the majority of us, when we jump into our car and somebody else has driven it and they've moved the seat a millimeter, I'm a British guy, I have to use metric. They've moved the seat a millimeter one way or the other, you can feel it. And that's the type of feeling that you need to get when if you can get there, you can get on the gun and you go, oh, wait there, that's not quite right. That's not quite right.
Yeah.
And then, either, move around a little bit, shuffle around and get in your normal position. But you're trying to get in that very similar, familiar position. Again, this all goes out the window in the competition world sometimes because you're particularly put in a stressful situation. But when you're training at the range and you're practicing, these are the things that you want to practice. And then when you are in a competitive situation, you're trying to, if you can't get your lower half of your body in that perfect position, at least get the top part of your body in the best position. Mm-hmm. And vice versa, if it's some wackadoodle thing the range officer's got going on, just try and get as comfortable as you can. But when you're training at the range, I think the key is trying to repeat a repeatable position that's comfortable. We were talking about head placement on the gun recently. That's very, very important. And just keep moving stuff around until you can get in a super comfortable position. I mean, I had a neck issue recently where my neck was painful and getting in the gun was still okay. And yet everything else wasn't. Explain that one. But anyway, that's an aside. But I think that, if we can get in that super comfortable position and then just relax and then go through our fundamentals preparing for the shot, I think we'll be in a great situation.
So the next podcast, and we're going to talk about keeping your emotions in check when you're shooting as well, because I've watched many shooters lose matches because they just lost control of themselves.
Well, that's a form of target panic right there, right?
It is big time, right?
Yeah.
But just really think about what we're trying to say here. And I guess I'm going to try to incorporate this in the shooting school just a little bit to touch base on when we talk about fundamentals and we talk about, hey, we got to be hypersensitized to all of this input without visually being able to see any of it. Where your trigger finger's touching, where it's touching at, it's not touching anywhere else, the amount of pressure you're putting on the rifle, where your face is touching the stock. You have to be super hypersensitized to all of this. And I was just really thinking about like how the person who lost his sight had to do that to compensate for the loss of vision, and it probably made him a better shooter because of it. So I want you to think about that when you're training. Like, start paying attention to the things and use like I don't want to sound like a Jedi type thing, but use
the Force.
Yeah,
Luke.
use the Force. Use your feelings. Like, focus on how much pressure. Like, one of the big things I'll throw out there before we talk about some other things here is I remember working really hard with an AI chassis when AI chassis come out, and one of the biggest improvements that I seen in my shooting when shooting it was focusing on cheek placement and cheek pressure. I worked on this for quite a while until eventually I found the exact amount of pressure and the exact place my face needed to be, and then it was just lights out. Like, all of a sudden, it was just me and that gun were one. Off to the races we would go, just shooting away. But it took a lot of practice. It wasn't just a simple act of putting my face in the gun. There was the amount of pressure where it was touching. You had to really pay attention to it, because when you get stressed out, it's the first thing you just overlook.
Right, absolutely.
Jam you on the gun and you start shooting.
Yeah.
So,
and I was going to bring this up because I know you're going to go into this in a future subject, but the whole thing about target panic, I think a lot of it goes away. Here's a good segue. If you're really, really used to how your trigger works, in terms of going through the shot. And I'm so happy I changed my triggers.
Yeah. So Richard went with a straight shoe.
Yeah, straight shoe, single stage, because I'm a pound and 3/4 guy, so I don't have to worry about having I shoot a decent amount of trigger pull, so single stage. So yeah, excited. Two new triggers.
I haven't changed mine, but I gotta say I really like the straight trigger shoe.
It feels so good.
It does. It's the feelings again, right?
Yeah.
So before we wrap up the podcast, I do want to say thank you to another sponsor, and of course, it's Trigger Tech. They are a maker of fine rifle triggers. Their new system with the roller bearing system, for me personally, it's a safe trigger. They offer lots of different options now, like the shoe, straight shoe, curved shoe. They offer different models where you can go right up to the Trigger Tech Diamond, drops down to 4 ounces. The Trigger Tech Special, which is our favorite trigger here. And then you got the Primary, which is less than $150. Just world-class triggers. So easy to install, easy to adjust, and user-friendly, and safe. So if you want to upgrade your rifle, factory or custom, and one of the best ways to do is put a really good quality trigger in, and we think it's Trigger Tech. So you can learn more about Trigger Tech. It's triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com, so you can stop over and learn more about those today. So before we wrap up the podcast, we are working on moving into a little bit bigger facility. We're working on trying to bring some machines in to do some more work here. Really excited about some of the stuff, the prototyping that we're working on. We have another patent that's actually in the process. So we're really excited for some other advancements that go beyond the ace in making custom rifles. But we're really blessed that we get to play in an industry that we love to be part of, and we get to do this for a living. And sometimes, they're long days, sometimes 12, 13-hour days. That even Richard was here yesterday for 10 to 12 hours anyway.
I specialize in that, it seems, at the moment.
So, but it's fun when you enjoy it and you're really passionate about the stuff. The hours just click by and you're still having fun doing it. But you can learn more about all that we do. It's our website's wolfprecision.net. We'd also like to thank everybody who's attending our online long-range shooting school. Our intentions with that was with COVID hit, that it really opened our eyes that we could bring a lot of this information to people that don't necessarily or can't come to our school here in Pennsylvania, though we'd love to have you. We really think you can get a lot of this great information remotely, and to be able to train and learn that stuff from the comfort of your own home, that's really awesome. So we are in session 1 still, which is day 1 from the shooting school. We'll be there for a little while yet. But in the end, I think right now we're setting it over 7-8 hours of content. When I think it's all said and done, we'll probably have over 40 or 50 hours of training online, which is really incredible. So you can learn more about the online long-range shooting school. You can stop over to wolfprecision.net, or you can see more of that on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the podcast and you don't mind sharing it, we really appreciate that as well. And if you always leave a nice comment, which a lot of you do, we really appreciate that. It helps us being found. We're really growing in the ratings, and that means a lot to us here. And it means we're maybe putting out some good information that helps everybody, and we're really thankful to be able to have the opportunity to do that. So thank you. If you want to support the podcast, you can stop over to Patreon, and for $3 a month, you can become part of Wolf Precision's team. And we really appreciate all those that have done that as well. So you can just look for Wolf Precision on Patreon. So, anything new and exciting that you're working on there, Richard? Because Richard works on a lot of stuff, but then he's always excited when he has a project he's working on. You can see he's playing with bolts and changing stuff around. And I look over and there's money on my desk for something else that he that he bought to put on his rifle. I'm like, what's that for? Okay,
that's one of the downsides of being around here is it's like, well, okay, I got to have one of those. I get to play with some nice stuff, but then suddenly it's like, okay, I need that.
Mm-hmm.
So money changes hands at time, and I get new cool things to play with.
Yeah, that's not a bad place to be. And we have a scope on back order that Richard had suggested. So we're working on some lightweight hunting scopes. And
where is that thing?
We did get a Leupold Mark 5 HD that was 3-15. It was incredible. It was under 20 ounces. We're close.
19.8 in the rings, if I remember correctly, and it was $1,000.
Yeah.
What a great value scope.
And I shot it on my personal hunting rifle, shooting at 100 yards, no problem. Track's perfect.
Crystal clear.
Oh,
by the way, I did twiddle the scope knobs before you used it.
Oh,
I did that.
Yeah.
I
Breaking
did that
in your scope.
Did that old trick, moving the grease around.
Yeah.
As I look at it, moving the grease around. And the glass was clear. Mm-hmm. TMR reticle, if I remember correctly,
and they offer MOA reticle as well.
And you had 2 turns on the CDS.
Yes.
The top turret was called a CDS, and it has 2 turns on it.
Yep.
The other scope we're waiting for, which I have my eye on, has only got 1 turn on the top turret. It's only got 6 mils available, which I think is going to be perfect for what I want it for. But
for a hunting scope, and then it has minutes or mils. And it's sub 700, I believe, and it's in the teens.
It was like $600.
Yeah,
$600 scope,
and it's in the teens. So, what we're trying to do is find really good quality scopes that you could put on a really lightweight hunting rifle and not have to put the big.
Oh, I'm sorry. The weight you're saying in the teens? Yeah, I think it was. I believe the book weight on it was 12 or 13 ounces.
Yeah.
It was a little bit lighter than the other one.
Yeah, so we're waiting for it. It's on back order. It should be here soon. We'll do some video reviews, but trying to come up with some really awesome scopes. And then just throw out there, like with the custom rifles here, we've been blessed that, we get to build custom rifles and play with all the cool stuff we do. But we have started delivering rifles now without the triggers. That was when me and Richard talked about this whole process, and he was like, well, let's just ask a couple customers, see what they say. Hey, would you mind saving $895?
Jamie, you have to say we had a focus group.
Oh, we had a focus group. Yeah, we were focusing with coffee, and the reception has been awesome. Yeah. One of the things that's our responsibility is deliver the best quality product that we can. Period. But then find ways to deliver to the customer in the most efficient and effective way, and potentially saving them some money in the long run too.
Yeah, although I think most of our customers are like this. They find a way to spend that money on more gear.
Yeah. I mean,
but at least we're not wasting money, right? That's the important thing.
Yeah, you got the extra $800 or $900 put towards your optics. Yep. And in some cases, you could actually buy your optics with it. Yeah. I mean, and actually have a pretty good scope. So that's been working well. We really appreciate all the customers placing orders and we have a trigger install kit available as well now. So if someone doesn't have the right tooling, gunsmithing tooling to put a trigger in, aka a proper gunsmithing hammer with a brass face on it and a pair of good punches, we have those available now, so you can add those to your order for a very small sum of money, and you'll be set for the future. You'll be ready to go. Yeah, so thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate it, especially on the custom rifle end and all the phone calls. Richard spent a lot of time on the phone the last couple of days, but that's sort of the nice part about when you get in these type of rifles, is you actually get to talk to somebody and ask questions. I think I blew someone's mind yesterday. I spoke to a gentleman about our technology. I always call it technology, right? The ACE. And he was just like, I've never heard of such a thing. And so it was good. I mean, it's interesting when you find someone who didn't understand the message, right, of what Wolf Precision is all about.
And that was good.
Yeah.
It was it was a great conversation. The guy's a very experienced shooter, done a lot of different things, big into extreme long range, but he had never heard of the ace, never heard of having the chamber separate from the barrel, and he was just like, it's blowing my mind.
Oh, that is
so that was a fun conversation.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to continue on this podcast here. We're going to be getting into the fundamentals, and we're going to talk about the little things, the dozens of little things that you need to be paying attention to that collectively takes a shooter from good to great. So, Richard, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We appreciate you stopping in.
Just like another day in the office between us two, Jamie.
There we go. And thank you so much, everybody out there, for taking the time to listen. We really appreciate it. So my name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.